Ohio State is vanquished again. And this time, no excuses. The better team won. Next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
They said you can't be Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sacked. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
I'm Go Blue. Sorry. Go Blue, and welcome to this victorious episode, been a lot of those recently, of Michigan Podcast. I am Steve Deace, and this time, there are no excuses. The better team won. Michigan does it. 3 in a row over the Ohio State University, the first time Michigan has done that since the 1997 National Championship team. J.J. McCarthy is the first Michigan quarterback to play in 3 Ohio State victories in his career since Brian Griese. And before that, you got to go back to Rick Leach. The Big Ten winning streak. Back-to-back 12-0 regular seasons. Michigan had never even had a 12-0 regular season in school history until last year, and now they've done it back-to-back for the first time ever. Rarefied air for this Michigan football program. And you can see why so many efforts were done to try to derail the team off the field, because it's damn hard to beat them on the field. And Ohio State learned that. I thought Ohio State played a very good football game. This was not the last 2 years. Nothing happened on a meta level here, like Michigan took Ohio State's manhood the last 2 years. This looked a lot like the Michigan-Ohio State games I remember growing up, albeit with more points. Both teams were physical. Remember the drive that Ohio State had? What was it? 7, 8, 9 straight runs to score the touchdown there. Yardage was pretty similar. But in the end, 2 trends held up. Michigan had the most rushing yards. The team that has done that has won the last 22 consecutive iterations of the game. And then the turnover battle. We told you last week the big stat to watch. Kyle McCord had the biggest difference of any quarterback in all of college football in terms of his quarterback rating from a clean pocket and then his quarterback rating when he's under pressure. From a clean pocket, top 5 in the country. Under pressure, 110th in the country. And that played itself out. Michigan didn't get as much pressure as I was hoping for throughout much of this game. The Ohio State offensive line, given the caliber of competition, played well. But it got pressure when it needed to at the end. The stunt with Mason Graham and Jalen Harrell got home and forced Kyle McCord to deliver the ball before he wanted to, and it was scooped up just before it hit the turf by Ohio native and not Buckeye, scholarship offered, Rod Moore, scooped it up just before it hit the turf for a clean interception to wrap up a third straight victory in the game. Final margin, 6 points, exactly what the power ratings said the game should have been. Why was it 3.5? Well, I think people were trying to, like I was, figure out what's the value of Jim Harbaugh? What's the value of a team that doesn't have a coach? Well, in this case, Sharon Moore did an incredible job. Offensive line coach, offensive coordinator, and head coach outcoached Ryan Day in this game. He coached like he was the underdog when he was the favorite. He was aggressive throughout. They had new wrinkles, ingenuity. And in the end, Michigan pulled it out with all that adversity, losing its best offensive lineman, Zach Zinter, to a gruesome injury. The chants from the fans in the stands. And then on the very next play, Blake Corum cuts it back off of Zach Zinter's best friend on the team, Trevor Keegan, his roommate, and explodes through a gaping hole and scores what went on to be the winning touchdown in this game. And on his 23rd birthday. And then he flashes the 6'5", folks. That's the stuff of movies, man. And this season is going to make a hell of a movie one day. All right. It might be a 30 for 30. It might be an E60. It might be a documentary. It might be a feature film. But with everything that's gone on with this season on and off the field, all of the drama, the level of focus and resiliency shown by this Michigan football team has even former Michigan players coming out of the woodwork. Doug Skeen, Charles Woodson, Desmond Howard, guys that have won a lot of championships here in Ann Arbor. And they are like, these dudes, they're the toughest Michigan team I've ever seen. The importance of this win from a long-term stability standpoint, there would have been a lot of questions had Michigan lost. But now Michigan knows who its coach is. It's either Jim Harbaugh or Sharon Moore moving forward. And either way, you now get to keep the bulk of that championship infrastructure in place. You don't risk another Brady Hoke, Rich Rod scenario. You don't risk becoming Nebraska, which is now going on 7 years in a row of not even making a bowl game. 33 consecutive one-score or 33 one-score losses the last 7 consecutive seasons for the Huskers. And they just have lost their entire identity, their entire brand, the winning culture gone in Lincoln. That can happen. If it can happen in Lincoln, you're damn right it can happen in Ann Arbor. And it nearly did in the Rich Rod Hoke era. So you don't have to risk any of that now. Your future is certain now. And it is certain that you've got a chance to play for a third straight undisputed Big Ten championship. It's amazing what has gone on here. It's amazing the improvement that's been made here. And I think a key point, it's not like Ohio State's fallen off. I mean, this isn't Jim Tressel beating Rich Rod. This isn't Urban Meyer beating Brady Hoke. I mean, Ohio State is still a top 5 program in this sport. Michigan just rose to the occasion. And I think in the end, you have to give an incredible amount of credit to Jim Harbaugh for this. You know, I work in an industry every day where humility lacks, self-awareness is dead, accountability is unachievable. If not, you purposefully attempt to elude it. And really, culture-wide, on multiple institutional levels right now here in our country, leadership is lacking. Lacking in our homes, churches, schools, government. It's lacking in a lot of places. Jim Harbaugh could have responded to the fact he should have been fired after 2020, and if he wasn't the most decorated quarterback in school history, he would have been. Anybody else that had that season and then the previous 2 hide your face embarrassment losses to Ohio State would have been canned, and it would have been deserved. He could have responded to that a lot of different ways, but he responded to it in ways we don't typically see. He looked in the mirror. He did a full assessment of the program, its strengths, its weaknesses, his own shortcomings, and he radically changed things. From the amount of autonomy to assistant coaches, to availability to players, to the accountability now no longer comes from the coaches, but from the players themselves. Dramatically reinvented the Michigan football program. And at a time when there was a lot of argument whether he deserved to still be the head of that program. And over the last 3 years, the results speak for themselves. This is one of the greatest periods in the history of Michigan football. This is Fielding Yost kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff that Bo never really got a shot to do when he and Ohio State were at their peak in the early 70s. Only one Big Ten team went to bowl games. We didn't have a conference championship game. This is one of the greatest runs in the history of one of the greatest programs in college football history. And it all happened because Jim took the humble pie. He didn't get bitter, as he likes to say. He got better. And the program did the same. And there's a lot that could be learned. The fact that the infrastructure here now is so sound, it is so secure, roles are so defined, that even when he's not on the sidelines, in front of 20 million people watching on TV and 110,000 in the stands, Michigan had one penalty. One. No turnovers. It's the least penalized team in college football, for goodness sakes. And the coach was gone for half the year. Who does that? It takes a very unique infrastructure and culture. And it takes incredible leadership to put something like that into place. And we just don't see that kind of leadership in many places in our culture these days. But one place that we have seen it is with the Michigan football program. Jimmy turned this in to what it was in its best eras, a player-led program. And you see now the players respond. They hold each other accountable. They support one another. You can see that they truly love one another. And to overcome, and some of you that are fans of other teams are going to say, it's not adversity when you created it and brought it upon yourself. One man's adversity is another man's controversy. Nevertheless, we can all agree there's been no team in the country that's had more distractions to deal with, self-inflicted or otherwise, than Michigan has for the last 6 weeks. And still, to overcome all of that and to keep winning at the level that Michigan is winning at, and to be on the brink perhaps of a third straight Big Ten championship, it's just truly remarkable historical stuff that we're going to remember the rest of our lives. We may never see another run like this. We're never going to see another game like this. With the new era now of an expanded college football playoff, no divisions in the Big Ten. This is the last time that we're ever going to truly see both teams are simultaneously great, and one team will stay home and the other team will march on. One team will ruin the other season and the other season will be made. That won't happen again in the future. Because whenever we have years like we've had the last few, when both teams have been great at the same time, they're both going to the college football playoff. They might just play next week in the Big Ten championship game. The last opportunity when both teams are great, that one can just wreck the season of the other, which is what has made the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry so special and set apart from all the others. This was the last time that we will see that. And Michigan has those bragging rights for all time because of the all-time run that this program is on. And here's the thing. I still think things can get better. Blake Corum can run better. J.J. McCarthy can play better. We still haven't even reached our ceiling yet. And let's hope that this is the time that we do. There is a window here. A lot of us thought last year was Michigan's best chance to win a national championship, and we may never see a window like that again. I think the window is even more open now this year, provided that ceiling, particularly where the quarterback is concerned, is reached. But for now, revel in this. Enjoy this. This was a monumental win. Monumental not just for this season, but for many future seasons to come. Go Blue. Steve Deace here, and we get asked a lot, hey, how can we support what you guys are doing at Michigan Podcast? Well, now is a great time to become one of our supporters on Patreon. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast is where you can go. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And if you go there, we're going to make you a little jingle. In fact, you would have gotten these a few months ago, long before the season even started. All of my 2023 football futures bets I've made thus far. I can't recommend a selection any more than I bet this myself. And last year, if you followed my football futures bets and you bet alongside of me, you made a pretty nice ROI chunk of change by the time the season ended. So keep up to date on all things we think and do here at Michigan Podcast patreon.com @Michigan Podcast. But more importantly, just $5 a month. And chances are you're going to make a lot more money than that following our sports betting selections. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. Again, Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And thanks to all of you that have been supporting us already. We appreciate each and every one of you. Go Blue. Well, let's get the view from the other side of the rivalry here, where it is a melancholy period if you are an Ohio State fan. And we know, as Michigan fans, what it's like. We experienced it for pretty much 20 years. So let's bring in Mark Rogers, who has an outstanding channel here on YouTube, the voice of college football. You should be watching all year round, but now he puts on his hat, not as passionate, but impartial observer of the entire college football landscape, but now Bucknut, and he'll try to remain reasonable in light of another loss. But Mark, it's good to have you back. In short, I thought both teams played very well. It reminded me a lot of the games I remember growing up, just a little more high scoring, but pretty much one team someone was going to make a mistake, someone was going to make a magical play. And if you go back to a lot of what we discussed last week, I kept bringing up this one data point. No quarterback had a wider chasm in QBR from clean pocket to under pressure than Kyle McCord. And, I mean, these teams were pretty even all afternoon. And yet, in the end, Michigan didn't get a lot of pressure on him throughout the game, but they did the last drive, and that QBR stat played itself out, and he threw a bad interception under pressure, and that was the game. I don't think Michigan took Ohio State's manhood like the last couple of years. I thought Ohio State played very tough, very physical. I thought Ryan Day stuck with the running game longer this year, did not panic. If I think really the only game management decision of his I don't understand is the way he played before the end of the half with still plenty of time and another timeout. Let me just throw the ball down the field to Marvin Harrison once, see if I get a flag, if I get an All-American play. I'd be questioning that in a game of very small margins if I were an Ohio State fan. But the rest of the way, I thought Ohio State played very well. They clearly learned their defensive lessons from a year ago. They made Michigan matriculate the ball up and down the field. They matched Michigan physically. The stats were pretty even. It's just, in the end, Michigan got pressure when it needed to and created a turnover to win when it needed to, and that was the difference in the game. I don't really think it's any more introspective or metaphysical than that this time.
It's the kind of football game that I usually enjoy if you take the colors off the two teams, just enjoying an elite matchup of two teams, because I don't like the 45-42 games because those are typically defensive deprived games. It's not that the offenses are just that good. It's blown coverages, a lack of interest in tackling. No, this is football at its finest, at this level at its finest, because when the offenses made plays, they legitimately had to make plays. Receivers had to make plays. Quarterbacks, J.J. McCarthy in particular, what impressed me, making throws under duress. Of course, the second touchdown of the game for Michigan, the throw that he made, not only from the perspective of the tight window downfield that was remarkable, but once you got the look of the shot behind center, to see him change his arm angle at the last second to navigate the hands and the traffic in his face to make that kind of throw, that was pretty ridiculous. Kyle McCord, I didn't have a huge issue in the way that he managed the game, played the game, threw the football, made decisions downfield from second quarter on. The first big mistake of the game, of course, I will say before I go into McCord's part in that, is that in Mike Sanders-Still and Will Johnson, Michigan may not just have the best corners in the country and cover corners in the country, but from the standpoint of ball hawking skills, ball skills, they are like receivers out there, and of course Sanders-Still was. Joel Klatt thought that Marvin Harrison Jr. on that first interception should have come back to the football, should have not allowed Johnson to undercut him. I don't know. I think only Ryan Day, Harrison, and McCord know what truly should have happened on that play. Regardless, Michigan made the play. Did I think, right there? Yes, I did, because I thought that this game might be more in the high teens and low 20s. And when you give up a 7, that's a huge deal. Yeah, Ryan Day at the end of the first half, even taking it before the point that you did, your punter, of course, hit one of his cue shots inside the 5-yard line. Tommy Doman took Ohio State down to the 1 or 2. And I thought, okay, there's still 3 minutes left in this half. Ryan Day, do not try to run on this defense. He went off tackle 2 plays in a row, and he put Kyle McCord in a bad spot. You're not gaining yardage against Michigan, especially in that situation, backed up against your own goal line, running the ball off tackle. And McCord basically bailed him out, or more accurately, Julian Fleming bailed out Ryan Day on a 3rd and 10 that really, because I'm thinking, okay, you're down 4, you're going to be punting from your own end zone. Michigan sets up at the 35 or 40-yard line. That's trouble. So they get the big plays. They've got the momentum. They're going downfield. Yes, 4th and 2. And in addition to not trusting the offense, not trusting McCord, and no, they wouldn't have been able to run the ball for a first down on 4th and 2. It's also the thought of you've got a kicker who has never kicked a ball this far in his life. He has never made a field goal within 5 yards of what you're asking him to do on a 31-degree day at the big house. Yes, it's not an end-of-game pressure, but it's still higher pressure than what he's accustomed to. Mm-hmm. I just thought he coached scared in spots, and that was the most obvious one.
Let's talk about the ramifications of this game. And I think on the Michigan side of things, I think it's pretty clear how a loss would have played out. But I think that's why I think it's the most important win. I think even more important than 2021 at this point than that Michigan has had over Ohio State in my lifetime. And I think you'd have to go back to 69. At the very least, I think it's on par with 21, and here's why. You have this program really humming right now, and it's a machine right now. And there's been a lot of, with all the suspensions and investigations and allegations and everything else, and you're going to have 3 jobs in the NFL open this year that all are coveted by Jim Harbaugh, that he has direct ties to those franchises, the Bears, the Raiders, and the Chargers, for example. You had Adam Schefter saying he could see 7 to 10 coaching vacancies in the NFL. And yeah, they're not hiring 60-year-old guys nowadays. Everybody wants to hire the next Sean McVay. But dude, there's only so many of those guys, and there's 10 openings. Got to think maybe the odds are getting higher that at least one of them would call. You're not sure where that's going to go. If Michigan loses this game, you might be looking at a situation where you've got to go out and find a new coach from outside the program, and that's always a roll of the dice. I mean, for every time that it works and you find your guy, you can Nebraska yourself or do what Michigan did to itself the last time. This win provides stability for Michigan. The next coach is on the staff, and his name's either Jim Harbaugh or Sharon Moore. And either way, the bulk of that infrastructure that is in place there will now get to remain. And I think that's massive for the program moving forward. And I think a loss and would have been a very interesting month leading up to an Orange Bowl that frankly nobody cares about on New Year's Eve. Well, now Ohio State. So I think Michigan's immediate future is pretty much secure at this point. The names may be, we may not know the names that will secure it, but the circumstances, I think, are. I think Ohio State now, the question is, I listened to Joshua Perry, who, of course, played for Urban Meyer, and I listened to what he said on Sirius XM the other day. He was very clearly disgusted with, some of the pregame rituals going on and the lack of physicality and the lack of focus, maybe even obsession with Michigan that he was accustomed to. You had Maurice Clarett coming out saying that essentially the Ohio State coach has one job. It's to beat Michigan. The other 9 games, there's a lot of coaches that could go out there and win those games with Ohio State's players. And he thought there should be a coaching change. A lot of media has come to Ryan Day's defense preemptively, including people like Joel Klatt, to kind of try to head this thing off. A new AD is coming at Ohio State, of course. What does this mean on the meta level for the Ohio State program?
Well, it's not good, but it's not good based on really much of what they've done. It's more about Michigan. And when you sized up the rivalry and the ebb and flow of this rivalry over the course of the time that we've both watched it, I'll go back a few years before I started watching it. And it hasn't been what it is currently in the last 3 years as mega top 5 national championship contenders since Woody and Bo in the early to mid 70s. And so Ohio State has not fallen for Michigan to catch up. They have stayed right where they are. Mm-hmm. And yes, I have all due respect and have trumpeted Urban Meyer's 7-0 record against Michigan, but he did not face this Michigan. Now, his postseason record, his national championships also speak to what he could do in big games and in building programs that would stay with the elite on a consistent basis. So Urban Meyer still much better legacy than Ryan Day, even outside of this game. But Ryan Day has defeated Big Ten teams 40 consecutive times outside of this game. This last game, as you mentioned, it's on the road for Ohio State. It's a very competitive game. There's a decided advantage at quarterback in Michigan's camp. Ohio State is going to bring in a top 3 class in 2.5 weeks. Michigan's going to bring in a top 12 or 15 class. Michigan's done a better job in the transfer portal. Maybe Ohio State needs to go more in that route. They basically had one impact starting player as a transfer, and Michigan has supplemented its offensive line play. They, of course, had the best center in college football a year ago. We could go on and on throughout the roster on both sides of the ball from Michigan because they have closed the recruiting gap through the transfer portal. Ryan Day is not coaching this game well. He is coaching this program well, and I understand the magnitude of this game. Believe me, as much as anybody, I understand the magnitude of this game. And if you were talking to the 15, 20, 25, 30-year-old Mark Rogers, I would tell you to fire Ryan Day. But who do you get to replace him, number one? Number two, you also can't make a rash emotional decision based on being mad about losing to Michigan. Even though that's the standard, we are going into a new era in 2024. And for as much as we wouldn't like it as Ohio State fans, let's say Ohio State and Michigan split 10-year periods going forward. Ohio State wants more than that, and now Michigan, now that they've tasted success, and I'm basing this on my interaction with Michigan fans who a couple of years ago just wanted to beat Ohio State once every 5 years, but I'm sure now want to win all the time, that's going to be good enough to get into the playoffs, win in the playoffs. This is a program that, other than 2011, the interim coach year, would make a 12-team playoff every season since 2004. So just the risk of going with another head coach, I'm not talking about risk like you're going to capsize at Ohio State. You're not, as long as you make a capable hire. But we are talking about one of the top 3 or 4 programs in the country, and you know what you have now. It's all working except coaching and preparing for this game.
Do you think there's a chance? I just mentioned all the NFL openings. Ryan Day actually fits the profile of what is getting hired in the NFL right now, not Jim Harbaugh. Okay. And I mean, one of the things that matters greatly in the NFL nowadays is a complicated and expansive passing game. It's a passing league now. And I mean, I can't even sit here and tell you, I think it's at least 50-50 that J.J. McCarthy's going to be back. I mean, he's not a first-round quarterback right now. He's thrown 1 touchdown pass in 4 weeks. Now, if they win the national championship, he will and should go at that point. And so I think the math will change. I'm kind of chuckling. It kind of reminds me after 21 when all the Buckeye forums said we had 75 COVID seniors. I don't think people understand a lot of the guys that just beat you are coming back again next year. But we'll get to that in the offseason again. Because that's what
You're
Michigan...
just chuckling all the time regardless now, Steve.
What's that?
You're just chuckling all the time regardless.
Well, that's what Michigan is doing with its NIL. Some programs are paying up front for top-end high school talent. Michigan is paying on the back end for grown-ass men and kind of zigging while everybody else is zagging. But Michigan's passing game is not a complicated NFL scheme of spreading the ball around and explosive plays, like what the NFL is looking for. And you didn't get that kind of year out of J.J. McCarthy this year. It started off thinking like it might be that, and then it kind of tailed off. That's what Ryan Day does. I mean, you look at teams like, well, Chicago, where his old quarterback is, Justin Fields, just won a game last night. They might have the top 2 picks in the draft. They'll have 2 of the top 5 picks in the draft, probably. Maybe the number 1 pick. You look at somebody like Arizona, might have a top pick, and they've got a quarterback that fits a Ryan Day system and Kyler Murray already there. You look at somebody like a Chargers, who has all the offensive talent in the world. They just need a better coach than what they have right now with Staley. I mean, what if there's a retirement? What if an Andy Reid wins another Super Bowl, walks off into the sunset? You can coach Pat Mahomes. Is there any concern at all? Y'all wake up one day in late January, early February, and he's like, "Peace out. I'm heading to the league."
Yeah, your prediction, whatever you call those, your off-season
crystal ball. Yeah.
Yes, your crystal ball. Yes, could come true a year or 2 later. If I'm Ryan Day, and I have to shun my allegiance, my loyalty, my fandom, I bleed scarlet and gray. He doesn't. He's looking at a career, a family, a location, all of those things. And when everything rides on one game, this is unlike, I know Alabama-Auburn is serious and all these other rivalries, but he basically can't do anything to correct this, and therefore can't do anything right to a large degree in most people's eyes until they play next year. He could have a number 1 recruiting class. They could pull in gems in the transfer portal. He can just breeze through a schedule that includes typical Big Ten teams plus Washington and Oregon. Those will not be big wins. They'll be taken for granted, and they shouldn't be, but he can't do anything right. Would I want to coach under those circumstances? I would not, and he shows signs prior to this loss. He showed signs of not, like if you read between the lines, he makes the comment every few weeks at a news conference, I know I've got to win every game here. I don't know that everybody's built for that. I think very few are built for that kind of scrutiny.
Let's look ahead to the Big Ten championship game. What do you think happens?
I think the safe projection is something in between an Iowa victory of them doing what they do against the Big Ten West and what we saw 2 years ago, that the Iowa defense plays extremely well, that Kirk Ferentz, knowing that his backup quarterback, Deacon Hill, is prone to make mistakes, which they cannot have, is going to coach and play call him out of that as much as possible. I think they will come in with a typical conservative Iowa game plan, but when they throw some wrinkles at Michigan, they're going to be like they did. They tried the some kind of a wide receiver, a halfback pass in the first drive or two 2 years ago, something Ryan Day should have thought of in regards to not necessarily that, but I didn't see any wrinkles in the Ohio State attack against Michigan. Cooper DeJean would have been fun to have watched because he's like the Jim Thorpe kind of athlete where he can do everything. He's the gunner. He's the returner, of course, and it would have been even more fascinating had the officials made a different call. And this is an 11-1 Iowa team, of course, that the College Football Playoff Committee would hate to have to do anything with. They would just, yes. It is just very difficult to find a path for Iowa because their capabilities, first, their desire to do anything different or feeling the need to do anything different, but also just their ability to play a different ball. They just don't have the outside capabilities. They don't even have their tight ends. Now, the guys that are playing third and fourth string, like Adam Ostrenga and others, are playing extremely well. They're playing like Iowa tight ends, but they do miss the two top guys. It's an exceptional defense. They are just going to, I guess it's going to be J.J. McCarthy versus Bowling Green and Iowa doing what Iowa does best, other than that, they have shown some offensive spark. They put up over 400 yards against a capable Rutgers defense a few weeks ago. And what I saw in that game and in the last few games, even when it didn't seem wise, they confounded me with actually pushing and driving the ball downfield on the final drive of the first half with little time left. They played very unlike Iowa football, driving the ball downfield with like a 3-0 lead at the end of the first half in a few of those games. So maybe they were trying to prepare for what was to come in Indianapolis.
I just think the problem Iowa has, it's just hard when you're playing a team that is clearly more talented than you, and you're going to play the exact same style. Like Iowa's going to be like, well, we want to make this thing a grinder. We want to make this thing a mosh pit, win at the line of scrimmage. And Michigan's like, I bet. I mean, that's what we do. You know, I mean, that's where I think the going back to Michigan, Ohio State last year, Michigan winning it on big plays. That's not the way Michigan wants to win a game. You know, Michigan's actually more comfortable playing the way Jim Knowles made them play this year. Okay, that's what they're made for. They're built to play that way. And that's the kind of game that Iowa wants to play. And you know, if you're a believer that styles makes fights, and I think most of the time it does, not always, because we're dealing with human beings here, but the reality is Iowa wants to play this game the same way Michigan wants to play this game. It's just Michigan's going to do it with a different level of recruit than what Iowa has. And I think that's what makes it hard when there's not a real contrast, even if their tight ends were healthy. I mean, well, one of them was a guy who used to play at Michigan. You know, Michigan's entire passing game last week against Ohio State was 7 of 8 completions for over 100 yards to the tight ends. You know, so I mean, it's a very similar style to what Iowa wants to play, and we ran into it. They ran into it when they played us 2 years ago, and then we ran into it in the playoff where we played against a Georgia team that had a different level of recruit and wanted to play the exact same way we wanted to play, and they were like, okay, cool, you know. I mean, it's hard to overcome the talent advantage in basketball when you guys play the same tempo, and in football when you guys play the same style. That's where it's really harder to overcome the talent advantage.
Yeah, they have built a program that is approach is toward the Big Ten West, and then they'll take their risk, they'll take their shot and figure it out when they advance past that. But they have been hyper focused on we want to be, plus there's got to be some level of thought, I'm sure, for decades that this is the type of athlete we recruit. We're a developmental program. And I just think maybe it's also Kirk Ferentz having some Nick Saban in him, but refusing to change. So wanting the past to be what football is today, but refusing to change, plus also probably believing that it's not the best route to go. But then they run up against Michigan, and Michigan is just as good or better at every position, every positional unit. And like you say, wants to play the same way, but has the explosiveness in them to, you know, I just feel like this is going to be one of these fairly close games for about a quarter and a half, and the dam's going to burst at some point. Michigan's just, and they're a much better version of what they were 2 years ago, in my opinion, when they won by 39.
Good stuff, my friend. Thank you. As always, appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, which win was your favorite? 44% of you said Ohio State 2023. 40% of you said Ohio State 2021. 16% of you said Ohio State 2022. How can you choose? It's like choosing amongst your own children. But I guess I'd go Ohio State 2021 if you put a gun to my head, simply because that was the first. But all my heart has done is expand all the more the last 2 years with the other two. Let's get to our feedback of the week. Oh, sorry. Okay. From Football Scout 365, he is predicting that Michigan slides into the top spot of the college football playoff rankings. If you're a Michigan fan, that's what you want. Do whatever it takes to avoid Oregon. I don't know if Florida State can survive the ACC title game without Jordan Travis, but that's the matchup you want. Going to be an interesting championship Saturday. Agreed, but let me just say this about that. Last year, we got exactly what we wanted. We got TCU as the 3 seed. That's exactly what we wanted, and we lost. If there's anything tournament play has taught us over the years when it comes to college basketball, for example, it's be careful what you wish for. Are there some teams that are better matchups for Michigan than others, and vice versa? Of course. But in the end, at this level, it's much more about how you play, not the other team. Michigan lost last year for no other reason other than, sure, a bad officiating call on the Roman Wilson touchdown, the opening drive where they went for it, tried the Philly special, didn't score. But the real reason that Michigan lost that game is J.J. McCarthy threw 2 pick sixes, something he hadn't done all year long. Take those 2 pick sixes off the table, those 2 mistakes, that's 12 points. You lost the game by 6. You win the game. Despite all that, all the mistakes, how bad your defense played. See, at this, when you get to this level, I think it's much more about what you do. And I'd be a little less concerned about, yeah, we want that or that's favorable. Be careful what you wish for. You've got a team like a TCU or maybe in your scenario, a Florida State who for a month gets told you suck, you can't win, you don't belong. That team comes in with the chip on its shoulder. You do you. You worry about you when it gets to this point of the year. I think we learned that lesson the hard way last year against TCU. Nevertheless, I agree. I'd rather play Florida State over Oregon, but that's why they play the games. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Hopefully we return next week to a 3rd straight undisputed Big Ten championship. We shall see. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, and share, follow, whether you're watching right here on YouTube or listening on iTunes or elsewhere. Help us to find more Michigan fans just like you. We would really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who are doing those things. Please keep doing them. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter in between episodes as well, at Michigan Podcast there. Until the next time, I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.